Hello and welcome to a live Kerfefe break on Deprogram with Keri Smith. Let's go, says Laura Higgins. Yeah, let's go. I'm glad you're all here. We have very special guest host today. Some of you already know her. I got to interview her, but it's been a while. She goes by Deplorable Knitter online, and she's one of the hosts of Politically Incorrect Knitters. She's also been called the most dangerous knitter because of her dangerous knitting designs. I imagine. Please welcome Deplorable Knitter.
Hey, Keri, thanks for having me.
I'm glad to have you. I haven't talked to you in a while. Well, I've been on your channel, which has been fun.
Yeah, you come on our channel and you knit. So Keri will be so quiet on our channel because you see her and she's over there knitting.
Yeah, I'm like trying to make sure I have it right. It's so good to have you on Deprogrammed, though, and I was wondering if you could tell people who may not have seen my interview with you, or maybe they're not in the knitting world. Can you tell people a little bit about yourself and your part in the knitting wars and why you got the moniker the most dangerous knitter?
Well, I'm the most dangerous knitter because I don't participate in the groupthink, which is, horrifying to most people. So I became Deplorable Knitter in November of 2018. I was in a conservative knitting group, and one of the women in my group said, "Hey, I would like to wear a hat to the midterms that says walk away on it." And they were like, "Has anybody seen a pattern?" And it was like crickets on this post. So I was like, "Sure, I can make that." I'd never designed a pattern before, but I'm like, why not? It can't be that hard. And so I did it, and then it got a lot of hate, but it also got like so much love. So then I started making patterns like Trump 2020, Build the Wall. That one did not go over well. You should have seen, it was removed from the website because the owners did not want to participate in President Trump's racist wall. So that's the kind of group I was in, Ravelry, which is where this was all happening, is a leftist site, and you can have all the fuck Trump patterns that you want on there, but heaven forbid you said anything pro-Trump and you were just the worst person ever. So it all came to a head, and I got removed because I was so dangerous. So
for anyone, it's hard to overstate this. For anyone who wasn't following this back then, they actually put out a statement. Ravelry did. Now, this is just a website, right? It's a community site for people who knit and who want to trade knitting patterns and knitting information. But they ended up putting out a statement about how they were going to ban all support of Trump because support of Trump was white supremacy.
Yeah. Never mind that the Trump supporters, like many of them were different colors and ethnicities and religions. No, they just said you're all white supremacists. And so that's kind of how I got to be who I was, just because we weren't taking it. We were like, this is so dumb. Like, they're so happy to have any leftist anything on it. But the minute you were like, hey, I like Trump, or I don't think all of his ideas are bad, like, you didn't have to be like a supporter of him. You could be like, hey, I thought he did this well. And they were like, uh-oh, white supremacist, you better go. Like,
yeah, you couldn't even support a political, like, you had to be a Democrat.
Yeah.
They decided it wasn't enough to be a knitter.
Yeah, they were like, oh, you don't have to be a Democrat, you just can't talk about it. But then they like retroactively went back into forums, and if you had said something positive about Trump ever, they were like removing people. Like,
I just want to show people, they put out a statement in 2021. So this is years later.
Mm-hmm.
They put out a new policy. This is from January 20th, 2021 policy. And by the way, look at the URL here is ravelry.com/content/no Trump. And it says policy, do not post in support of Trump or his administration. And then it continues. Although Donald Trump is no longer president of the United States, this policy is in effect in perpetuity.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have their old statement here from June 23rd of 2019. We are banning support in Donald Trump and his administration on Ravelry. This includes support in the form of forum posts, projects, patterns, profiles, and all other content. Note, that we will not destroy Pocket Notebook data. If a project needs to be removed from the site, we will make sure you have access to your data. Even if you are permanently banned from Ravelry, you will still be able to access any patterns that you purchased. Also, we'll make sure you receive a copy of your data. And then in bold, we cannot provide a space that is inclusive of all and also allow support for open white supremacy. Support of the Trump administration is undeniably support for white supremacy. This is a knitting site.
When you read it out, it's just so ridiculous. Like, I was there, and when it was happening, I was so upset. But now looking back, they're ridiculous.
It's so ridiculous. It's absurd. But you know what's crazy? The mainstream and the cathedral ran with it. There was a piece on the Colbert Report, which I've played before, where Stephen Colbert announces this and reads from this policy. You know, knitting site Ravelry is banning Trump because Trump support is white supremacy, and his whole audience cheered. like that doesn't, it just, some things like that still blow my mind.
Yeah. I don't understand even a little bit, honestly. It's ridiculous.
Because it's like his audience most likely considers themselves liberals, and they're sitting there clapping for censorship.
Yeah. Yeah, no, nobody, they don't mind it as long as it's not them being censored. I mean, that's really what it came down to. And the conservatives weren't even mad that they didn't want political patterns on there. You know, people look at me, they're like, oh, Deplorable Knitter, you must be super political. But honestly, the only reason I started making the Trump patterns was because they had so many against Trump. I was like, you know, I can't be the only knitter on earth that is like, I would wear a hat for Trump, like a winter hat. That was one of my most popular designs. It said Trump 2020 on it. It's winter hat.
So to be clear, they didn't ban political designs or commentary. You could still make a Hillary hat.
You can make a Trump voodoo doll. There's patterns for that on there. Big things that say F Trump on them. But if it's not horrible, then you may not use it. You may not put it up there. That's what the problem, that's what most people had the issue with. It's not that they said you can't have Trump stuff. It's that they labeled everybody white supremacist, and then they also were like, oh, but if you hate him, go for it. Like, have fun.
Yeah. This is the kind of story that I think people in my old echo chamber, like the leftist echo chamber, always wonder what they truly think about this. If you try to have a conversation with them about it, a lot of times, and I have talked about this stuff with people I know in real life, if you get them one-on-one and it's not online and it's not public, often they will say, well, I think that's a little excessive. I think you should be able to, you know, to share, to support a different political candidate, even though I think he's odious and white supremacist or whatever they think he is. Right. They usually agree, but publicly they are, it's like they're afraid to say that, or they're afraid to, you know, they'd rather sit in the audience of Colbert and cheer it on. I don't know. So you were banned from how many platforms for your patterns?
No, I was just banned from Ravelry at first. I wasn't ever banned from another platform, but Etsy did remove my pattern that said "Stop the Steal" on it.
That's what I remember. Etsy took down "Stop the Steal"
because it was misinformation, you know. So,
by the way,
I wasn't allowed to put that out.
YouTube may now take down this video because we uttered those words in that order. I just realized.
I hope not. It was just, it said it on there. Sorry.
Well, this is where people can find you if they want to support you, if they want to find your patterns. The channel is called Politically Incorrect Knitters. You've got a Patreon, and you also have a site. It's linked below in the description where you sell all these different dangerous knitting.
Horrible patterns. I have, the cool thing about it is I got onto a really nice Christian site, and you know, as long as the stuff I'm saying isn't vulgar or isn't, you know, against people, they don't care. You know, it has to be a biblically sound thing that I'm saying, and it's fine. So that I'm okay with that, because generally I don't want to put out patterns that are rude anyway, so it works out. And
so then you and Anne Pinkava started Politically Incorrect Knitters.
Yeah.
Sorry, one second. I'm just distracted because my husband's leaving. Goodbye. Oh, that's fine. No, that's fine. Aw. He's going on the road to do some music. So you and Anne Pinkava started Politically Incorrect Knitters, and it is a fun, fabulous panel in my experience being on there. You bring in a lot of different knitters. I've been on there before with um, Neil James from Blocked Magazine, the editor of Blocked Magazine, and you always have like several different people on at once. Can you tell people a little bit about that show? Like, what are you guys trying to do with it?
Well, Anne and we have a weekly show that is, sometimes we have guests, but often it's just Anne and I. We talk about our knitting, our new yarn, because as a knitter, yarn is important. And we talk politics because a lot of people are sick of the news. And so we try to like talk about the stories that are interesting to us and kind of give everybody a little bite-sized portion of them. We're not like a huge news story, but we'll give you the overview. If you want to know more, you can go figure it out. But you have come on our Knitting Wars show a lot, and that is just utter nonsense. That we have, sometimes it's just Anne and I and another guest, and sometimes there's several of us. It depends on who's available. But we just talk knitting. We have a knitting leaderboard, which you are not in last place on.
Really? I thought I was dead last.
No, somebody else only got one stitch, I think.
What?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, Bertie Rose, because she was trying to learn how to knit online, which doesn't count. And then there was another person who was down at the bottom too. So yeah, but we have a knitting leaderboard, and because I don't watch Geeks and Gamers, but Anne loves that. And so she was like, we need kind of something for our community that's similar to that, where it's just people getting together and doing whatever makes us happy, like whatever's fun and exciting. So that's what we're trying to do.
Can I tell you, this was very exciting for me. I think I told you on your show, but I'll repeat it here. When I was at the last Geeks and Gamers meetup that I was at was the Orlando one, and the Friday Night Tights people and Nerdrotic people, Geeks and Gamers, and you're meeting lots of people who are like, oh hey Keri, I've seen you on Friday Night Tights, what have you, people from all over. But the best was this woman who's like, hey Keri, I know you from Politically Incorrect Knitters.
Really?
Yes.
I don't remember hearing that. That's awesome.
Yes, it was awesome. She was there with her husband, and he was a Geeks and Gamers fan, and she, I think, was a fan of both, but she knew me from your that's where she had seen me, was Politically Incorrect Knitters. So that was awesome. That was super cool.
Yeah. But we just want to have fun, sometimes with the whole conservative thing, it's like there's too much. We just want to have fun sometimes, believe it or not. So that's what we're going for with that show.
And also, I think what you guys are doing is great because you provide a space and a community, to use their word, but a fellowship. You provide this space for people who are don't fit in with woke, but are still knitters, which is probably most people. So if they're rejected from places like Ravelry, you're building this whole fellowship of knitters at Politically Incorrect Knitter. So I think it's wonderful what you're doing.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. We're because when you get kicked off of something, even though it's been several years now since we got kicked off of Ravelry, there's still people who are like, I don't knit anymore because of it.
Yeah.
And I get it, because part of the appeal of that site is that you can like see other people's projects, and you can see other people's what they're working on and how they've changed designs, and it gives you inspiration, and it gives you, you can ask questions. And so you lose that, and it kind of takes some of the joy away if you don't have a group to do that with.
I can see how psychologically you would start to, this thing that you love, this hobby, instead of associating it with all the positive things about it, you can start to easily associate it with the negative, the rejection, and all of that. I remember interviewing Maria Tuscan, and she was one of the knitters, for anyone who doesn't know, yarn makers who the SJW mob just went after and tried to destroy professionally and personally. And she had said at one point when I first talked with her, that she had quit knitting for a while too, because she associated with that. Fortunately, she started knitting again eventually, but yeah, that can happen where you're like, I can't do this thing right now because it's got all this negative association.
Right. And it's crafting on your own is great. Like I love to craft. Sometimes, I'll like shut my bedroom door and be like, kids, go find something to do. I need some me time. But also like I get more done if my mom and I get together and knit together. Because then if I have a question about something, she's there to kind of bounce ideas off of. And you need to find community somewhere. And that's what we're trying to do. And it's kind of part of why I started a Patreon, because yeah, I do politically incorrect knitters. Yeah, I'm on Instagram, but like I don't get to talk to people about knitting, like really talk to them. And so like through my Patreon, I'm able to do like, hey, let's have a virtual knit night. Let's get together. Because everybody needs that community. And I think that makes a big difference.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you're doing. Well, thank you for joining me here today on Kerfefe Break. We're going to talk about some things in the news that caught my eye and hopefully have a few laughs. And if there's anything you want to talk about, I will say, people in the chat, somebody was making fun of the hat. It's okay. I know this hat is dumb, but I absolutely love it. And it's one of the warmest hats that I have. and it's still cold here. I was telling Deplorable Knitter before we started, if you watch the show regularly, she's Deplorable Knitter's in a place where the temperature is way low, much lower than it is here. However, what I'll say about here in Texas and during the storm is we don't have, like, we do have heat, but because we're in the middle of renovating, we don't have skirting on the house. There's all these other issues with insulation and single pane windows and that we're learning about. Anyway, it got down to 35 degrees down here in the downstairs. And today it's climbing up. It's in the 50s. So I'm doing much better, but I'm still dressed. It's funny, when you're upstairs, it's fine. And then when I get ready to come downstairs, I'm like wrapping up like I'm going outside. Like I'm going into the downstairs. I'll see you later. But yeah, it's Ken Johnson. It's cold in Texas. Yeah, we had another one of these winter storms like a couple years ago, and there's been all kinds of, I had lots of friends who lost power. I lost it, but just briefly. But lots of people without power, and we didn't have water yesterday. Our town's, the water main broke, and there's been people, of course the roads were icy and there's all kinds of branches falling. So it's been kind of wintry, chaotic in Texas. But by tomorrow it's going to be great. That's the thing. It turns around pretty quickly. So yeah, Laura says it's 12 degrees here. I mean, I feel like a baby whining about the temperature in Texas. It's not that it's that cold. It's that it's our house problems that will be fixed by next year. So that's what it is.
And you're also not built for this kind of weather. It's not the normal. Whereas here it's 5 and my house is nice and cozy. I was telling Keri before we started that I had to take my socks off. I was too hot. Like, I have a sweater on and I was dying. But
well, I've actually
for it.
Yeah, well, I've actually got warm enough with this space heater to take my coat off. So I feel good. Like today, like I said, it's climbing. It's in the 50s down here. I'm like, this is good. We had some contractors over earlier this morning, and when the one guy put his coat on, he's like, oh, it's so cold here. I'm like, no, it was cold a few days ago, like really cold. But it's warming up now. So anyway, if you're having weather problems, I hope you get out of it soon. I hate it. I hate when people are without power. I hate when we're without power, without heat or water. It sucks. And it makes me just, I have that thought again. I don't know if you've ever had this thought of like, there's so many little things. I know it's cliche, but it's true. So many little things we take for granted all the time. And then when you're without water or power for a little bit, you're like, why do I just ignore that? Like that beautiful gift that I have of indoor plumbing. I need to be grateful for that.
No, here at my house in my area, they're talking about putting in those remote electric meters, the smart electric meters. And I'm like, no, I don't want that, because they're going to start shutting people off when they deem you that you're using too much, or yeah. And so I've been thinking about it a lot, like how much I love having lights and heat, and in New York too, our governor is not going to let us have gas stoves. They're taxing firewood. So they're really, really trying to make it so that you are dependent on the electric system. You're dependent on, that way they can control what you do.
They're taxing firewood?
Yeah, that's what I heard. I haven't bought any. Lucky we have trees we can use, but yeah,
I'm
it's
just
crazy.
looking this up. This is crazy. Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I know that there's certainly they don't want you to have gas fireplaces anymore. New constructions aren't going to be allowed to have gas stoves because heaven forbid you can like get power or heat without them knowing. So
Yeah, I think that's part of their push, their deranged, coordinated attack on gas stoves that happened last month. It just came out of nowhere, and then they were all suddenly speaking the same language about gas stoves. I'm like, what is this about? They definitely want us to be more dependent on them.
oh
Some,
yeah.
yeah, something to do with that for sure.
My husband's like, should I buy another stove and put it away until we need it? And I'm like, I think we're okay for right now. We could talk about that if we have to, but it's crazy.
It is crazy. Okay, I've got something crazy to share with you.
Yeah.
This cracked me up. I made a joke on Twitter about pandering to women, and I made some joke about paper towels, and then this person shared with me, oh, it's happening, they are pandering to women with paper towels. And this is Brawny's new campaign for Women's History Month, which is next month, I guess. And it says they have a whole website. First of all, they have the new packaging, which it has a woman in the red plaid shirt. On Brawny, you're used to seeing the lumberjack with the red plaid, and the limited edition packaging has a woman in the red plaid, and off to the side it says limited edition, strength has no gender. And then you can come to their website, brawny.com/strength has no gender, and they have this whole campaign. I just wanted to read some of this to you because I'm just fascinated with it. So they have this picture of a girl and two women in celebrating generations of strength, celebrating the sheroes. Just that word makes me laugh.
It's a terrible word. I don't want to be called that ever.
It's like some old guy wrote this copy, I think. Celebrating the sheroes who have inspired us. This Women's History Month, the Brawny brand is celebrating what it means for generations of female pioneers to forge the path to progress, shatter gender stereotypes, and inspire young girls and women to follow in their footsteps. You sell paper towels. Like, this, you sell paper towels.
And not to be a jerk or anything, but hasn't it always been marketed to women? I mean, like back in the day, weren't we the ones doing all the cleaning up? Supposed to make our lives easier and stuff? Like,
well, yeah, and I think it was your co-host, Anne. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I saw someone on Twitter say, they don't know how to market to women. This is like getting in the way of the. I like thinking about the lumberjack in my kitchen while I'm cleaning up.
I'm not on Twitter, but that does sound like an Ann comment, so I wouldn't put it past her.
Oh my gosh, it's just so funny that it's like a religious kind of pandering. And I was thinking, it made me think of I don't know, my mind just went to all the comedy, all the funny stuff with this, because you don't even have to make fun of it. It's so funny by itself. But it's
Right.
like the future is female paper towels, because the future may be female, but somebody still needs to clean up the spill. Like, or if they got more to the point, it would just be like, give us your lady dollars while we pander to you paper towels. Like, right on the
That's
end.
totally true. And I went on the site after you mentioned it because I hadn't seen this yet. And the thing that I've focused in on was the whole like, oh, we're promoting girls in STEM stuff and blah, blah, blah. And so I made my husband come out of his office for a minute. He was working, and I'm like, dude, oh yeah, see right here, the STEM stuff. My husband has a biology degree. And so I'm like, hey, can you talk to me about biology like when you were in college? And he's like, oh yeah. So like when I started in college and my freshman lab, he was like, it was a huge diverse mix of everybody. And he goes, and as throughout the years, people dropped out and whatever. And he said, I didn't realize it until I was in my senior year and I had to go back and help in freshman lab. All the girls had dropped out. So like he's like, and it wasn't like they weren't accepted. It's not like they didn't want them. It's just is it okay if we don't do as well in those subjects? Yes, some women do great, but why do we have to push it?
Why
Why do
push? Why
women
force
have
it?
to be in these?
Yes. And women actually, if you look at like the Scandinavian countries, which are more, uh, I've heard them described as more egalitarian than we are, even in the US. And if you look at what women, Jordan Peterson's the first one I heard talk about this. I've since heard other people talk about it, but women self-select in those countries the greatest amount of freedom to do whatever you want, right?
Uh-huh.
They self-select to work with people more often than things. So
Right.
they're going into things like medicine and nursing and veterinary care, but they're not going into like let me be an engineer at Google, you know?
Right.
And and James Moore, the Google employee who was raked over the coals for saying some obvious truths, you know, he brought this up. It's like a lot of people, like the jobs at Google, some of the jobs, the engineering jobs, they require crazy late hours, a
Mm-hmm.
focus just on this, and it tends to be more often than not there are men who want to commit those hours to that kind of work, and women choose other things. Plus, if you look, women who are high achieving in science and math, on average, the ones who are very highly skilled in those areas, they're also highly skilled in other areas that men, and more than men are. The men who are highly
Right.
skilled in math and science are not as likely to also be skilled verbally or to be able to have as many opportunities as those really smart women are. So I think
Mm-hmm.
to some degree you've got a lot of smart women. Like I look at the women I went to school with. I went to a science and math school before I went to college, and it was supposed to be, you know, the brightest in the state. And it was a lot more rigorous than my college. But the men, a lot of them did go on to work at places like Google and Snapchat and all those things. And some of the women did, but a lot of the women chose other fields. And
Mm-hmm.
so anecdotally, I think that bears out that like a lot of those very talented women were like, oh, well, yeah, I could do science or math, or I could do these other things.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, that was me
But
talking a lot.
no, it's fine. But it's one of those things that he mentions from time to time. Like, you know, when I was in my freshman labs, there were always so many different people, you know, and he said, and as time went on, and he said, I didn't think the courses were terribly hard, but it did build on itself. So I suppose if you weren't understanding it in freshman, then obviously it's going to be harder for you as you move on. He's like, yeah, but by the time I was a senior, I didn't even realize that it had happened, you know? And
Mhm.
he was like, yeah, there were no girls. There was like one. He's like, I remember having one as a lab partner my senior year. Like, but I just don't understand why we have to push this. My husband is so smart, like you were saying. I used to have to help him write emails, especially like really like, you know, when you've got to like reach out to somebody and
Right.
tactfully do something. I would be like, you need to let me read that first, because knowing him, he's going to like write one sentence like, you're wrong. This is how it's done. And I'd be like, honey, just let me help you with that. Just like, let's put in another sentence. Like, this isn't optimal. Let's change how we're looking at, you know, like, because he's a great smart dude, but sometimes he has the, you know, emotional capacity of a teaspoon. So he needs help. And I don't understand why we can't look at all of this stuff and say people are different.
People are different and let people choose what they want. I agree. It seems to be, well, I mean, it is. It's this propaganda campaign to push girls into STEM. And you know what? Like I said, I went to a science and math school and I didn't grow up and we had all this stuff pushing me there. And I
Mhm.
also never felt like I couldn't do it. I didn't need all this crap, this propaganda that's like, you know what, girl, you could be smart. You could do science and math. I didn't need that. Because what it does, it has this, I think it has this reverse psychological effect. If you're young and you're seeing this propaganda all the time that's like girls can do science too, then you start to think the brain is like, wait a minute, do people think I can't do science? Like do people think I can't be a science because I'm a girl? I didn't know. And it starts to negatively affect you. Like I don't think this propaganda is good. That's what I'm saying. I think it has the opposite than intended effect. But
I think you're totally right. And but I think it's cool, like if you're watching PBS, which I know is kind of woke, but Like they'll be like, "Oh, look at this female astronaut," which is
That's
cool.
great.
Like, yeah, tell me more about her. That's
Yeah.
awesome. But like, I don't need the whole messaging of like, you could be an astronaut. Why aren't you an astronaut? You should go be an astronaut. Like, get
Yeah.
over it.
Girls could be astronauts too. You're not stupid like everyone thinks you are. And they
What
do.
see, I personally, I don't get it. I have a cousin that just graduated as an engineer, mechanical engineer, maybe. She's awesome. Great. You know what I used to say when people said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I'd be like, "A mom." Like, it's
Aw.
okay to like want to do that. That's as valid as anything else, you know? But we live in a society that doesn't think that it is, and that's part of the problem.
You know what I wanted to be when I was a little girl? My
What?
husband and I talked about this recently, and I actually found an old. I remembered it correctly because I found in some old writings when I was a kid, and I had listed it out bullet pointed like these are the careers I'm choosing from. I don't know. I may have been 8, and it was like I want to be, I want to work for the FBI and solve crimes, and I also want to work with animals, and I also want to be a writer. And so then I was trying to figure out how to make those things go together. And when I saw that movie with Jim Carrey, what was it? Pet Detective. I was like, that's it. I can be a pet detective who writes up the reports from the animal involved crimes. There you go.
That's awesome.
Didn't do it
Yeah.
though.
My kids, I mean, my kids are around that age, and sometimes I'll be like, "What do you want to be?" One of them's like, "I don't know," and the other one's like, "I'm gonna be a doctor, and then on my days off, I'm gonna do this," and I'm like, "Okay, cool, have fun." I don't know if you have that many days, but you can try. Whatever.
Kids are great because they have so many different interests. Like, I want to be a doctor and a cosmetologist.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're usually things like that that don't go together. Like, I'm gonna be a doctor. You know what? It might have been something like that. I might be like a doctor and a barber, and I'm like, okay. I mean, barbers used to be doctors, so I guess that kind of goes, whatever.
Yeah.
But
Okay. Well, so I'm gonna scroll through just a little bit more of this. So they're
yes,
basically saying, according to our brawny research, um, girls are more interested in science and computers and math than their moms were. And so that's what they're showing here, these figures. And then they have they're promoting Girls Inc. And then they
mhm,
have a place for you to give them your email address
of
for
course.
info on new products. There you go.
And also, girls are more interested in this stuff because when I was a kid, we didn't even have a computer in our house until I was in like high school. So it probably didn't even dawn on me to be interested in working with computers because it wasn't really that much. I mean, it was a thing, but it wasn't like it is now. So that's a stupid survey anyway.
Yes. It wasn't
Anyway,
the same when we were younger. We
yeah,
didn't, because you know what they would need to do to show me that that means anything is to also put up the stats for the difference between boys and their fathers
yeah,
and how many wanted to go into those things. If you showed me that there's been a growth in girls wanting to do that, and there hasn't been a growth in boys wanting to do that, then okay. But you're just showing me the stats about one gender. The other thing somebody pointed out about this campaign, which is it just makes no sense. The woke often make no sense. They say strength has no gender. Okay, then why are you making a big deal about switching the gender of the person on the packaging? Who cares? If strength has
right.
no gender, just let the brawny guy stay the brawny guy. Like,
I mean, especially since his head's like, if you're gonna do it like that, just cut him off at the neck. We'll never know what it is, especially in this day and age.
yeah, they did cut them off at the neck. By the way, I can't
Well,
scroll.
no,
Oh yeah,
you can see just their chins. I'm saying,
yeah,
if you go down like another 3 inches,
yeah.
you'll never know.
Never
Doesn't
know.
matter.
I just wanted to read some of the funniest taglines and marketing ideas that I saw people post in response to this. One was somebody on my timeline said, "You can't spell brawny without bra," which I really like. I think that's might be my favorite one. And then somebody else said they should have called it broadly instead of brawny, which is kind of
Yeah.
funny. And he said the tagline would be "Nobody cleans up like a dame." So stupid. Anyway, I don't know who this is appealing to. I don't know any women who are like, oh, they're marketing to me. Let me go buy these paper towels now.
You know
I
what?
just,
You know how they would get me in? By lowering their price and offering me more. That's what I'm interested in. I don't give a crap what the name is. If it's too expensive, I'm not buying it. Brownie is too expensive. Sorry. Move on. Okay.
please pander, Brawny. Please, your next marketing campaign, please pander to those of us who would like lower priced paper towels.
Yeah. Yes,
That's
exactly.
it.
Beat the Aldi price and I'm there. Otherwise, I can't help you. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Thank you for laughing at that with me. That's one of those things I'm going to be looking at just to have a laugh for days. I can tell because it just cracks me up.
I
Anyway.
don't know whoever decided that Shiro was a thing and that we should be called it.
No.
I think it's the words. Like, gosh, I don't want to be Shiro.
I mean, even that word alone just makes me laugh. Celebrating the Shiros. Okay. Okay, I've got one other funny thing I wanted to show you. It's funny, but it's also somewhat serious because I think it's a good illustration of manipulation, of failed manipulation and con artistry. And this is this viral clip that's been going around of AOC. If you guys haven't seen it, we're going to play it. Let's see. It's very short. Here we go.
Don't tell me that this is about a condemnation of anti-Semitic remarks when you have a member of the Republican caucus who has talked about Jewish space lasers and an entire amount of tropes and also elevated her to some of the highest committee assignments in this body. This is about targeting women of color in the United States of America. Don't tell me because I didn't get a single apology when my life was threatened. Thank you.
Okay. So I have a couple thoughts. What are your thoughts on this?
I don't know. Don't people get sick of their faux outrage? That's one thing that gets to me.
Yes.
Like, man, dude, how much energy does it take to be mad all the time? Should I start doing it? Would that be like a weight loss thing for me? Because it's not, I don't know. I got to do something. Maybe wasting all my energy on being mad about stuff that doesn't matter will help. I don't get it.
It might be a weight loss thing to be angry all the time, but I think then you would also pick up other negative things, like your heart rate is increased all the time and you have more anxiety and your hair starts falling out and probably all kinds of skin problems. So
you lost me when the hair is falling out. I do like my hair. I'm not gonna go there. But
great thick hair. I love it. Yeah. So my thoughts on this are that yes, it's faux outrage. It's fake. My immediate thought was that she's doing the preacher, what I call the preacher. It's this kind of fake persuasive way of speaking that's meant to manipulate people and to remind you of other persuasive speakers throughout history who spoke this way and who had this cadence. She's trying to rip off. There are a lot of people who try and emulate the cadence of Martin Luther King. Mm-hmm. They try and speak the way he did, with the cadence and the gestures of a preacher, and with this emphasis, and to speak in this emphatic, persuasive way. And the reason they do that, I think, is because it works.
Right.
It is persuasive. It works on a lot of people if you nail it. And somebody who nails it really well, I think, is Michael Eric Dyson. I hate his views. I think he's repugnant. I think his ideology is disgusting. I think he personally is disgusting. And I think he uses the preacher, though, very effectively to cover over any inefficiencies in his ideas. It's because he's speaking in a persuasive way and he nails it. But she is trying to do the preacher and failing. Like, she doesn't get it. She's stumbling over her words. It doesn't come naturally to her. She's looking down at her notes, and it just, to me, this is like, okay, maybe people can see this. If they can't see it, if Michael Eric Dyson is doing it, maybe they think that's natural for him to speak that way, but they can see it with her because she's failing at it. So I really like this clip. I think it's a good education in manipulation tactics, maybe, in the personas that con artists try to put on, right, to fool people.
Yeah. I I gotta say, I'm so sick of people talking about color. And I know it's Black History Month and it's all we're gonna hear, but it has nothing to do with Ilhan Omar's color. It has to do with the fact that she's pretty awful and she shouldn't be on that committee. Like,
Yeah.
it,
If someone says, hey, these comments of yours appear to be anti-Semitic, can you explain them? The proper response is to either explain them and show how they're wrong.
Mhm.
It's not, whatever you do, the response is not to do what the woke do, which is to say, hey, I'm a woman of color. so don't ask me that, because you're just trying to attack me because I'm a woman of color. They always genuflect to that. They always revert back to that. They're always like, no, you're just attacking me because of who I am, my identity, whatever. It's like, no, they're calling out some things that you said. Is there a defense of those things or not? Right. Are they misinterpreting those things or not? It has nothing to do with who you are.
That's exactly it. And you mentioned Neil earlier, Neil from Black Magazine, but he has a habit of calling out. There's in the knitting community, there's a whole group of BIPOC. I don't know what the term is anymore. I think they don't use that anymore, but Black people of color who are constantly talking about what color they are. And if you say anything against them at all, you're racist. And it's, you have bad ideas. You are saying, if I went around saying anti-Semitic things and I had no good reason for it, then yes, call me a racist. But because she is a person of color, then you can't say anything about it. Like they wear it like a cloak, like a armor, so that they can get away with whatever they want to do. And there's a whole group in the knitting community. They're like, oh, you can't question me.
Mm-hmm.
But why?
But they drop that really fast if the person that you're criticizing or they're criticizing is a Black female conservative. Then it's absolutely okay to criticize them, to call them names, to criticize their ideas, to criticize them as a person. They don't follow that rule themselves.
I don't. Everybody's like, oh, I want to get away from seeing race. Then stop talking about it. Like, that's what we have to. I don't understand what we're going to. Not where I meant to go with this, but
yeah.
I'm just so sick of this. Like,
they don't want to get away. I think it betrays their real motivations. The thing is, like, social justice people, they say they're all about ending racism. And some of the people who are in it, I think they actually believe that. I actually believed that for a long time. But the ideology itself is not about ending racism. It's all about making it worse. It's all about growing racism and seeing race constantly and dividing people up based on race. And so you see that it bears out in their phony arguments when instead of making an argument, they just fall back on their identity. It's like, well, I'm not going to actually engage you on your criticism of my ideas. I'm just going to point out the fact that I am this race and this gender. And, and it's like, yeah, well, that has nothing to do with anything.
Right.
But yeah, it betrays the real motivations, though, I think, of the belief system, which is that it's really about furthering racism and furthering division between people.
Right. No, but AOC in that clip, I watch her and I don't know how people can take her seriously. And when you mentioned that clip, I went and watched it. And then also Rashida Tlaib had a speech too. And she's like crying at the end and stuff. And it's just seems like a lot of emotional manipulation. Like, I'm gonna have this outburst. I'm gonna have this if a white male had done that, he would have been mocked relentlessly in the news. But because she is a woman of color, then she can. My kids don't have tantrums like that. I guess that's kind of what I was getting at. Like, I'm watching these people, and you're not talking about anything of substance, and you're just talking about your color, and you're going to cry on top of it. So now I really can't say anything about it because then I'm not a nice, compassionate person.
It's like emotional blackmail.
Yeah.
It's what some kids do, not all kids, but it's a childish tactic.
Right.
Yeah.
No. when my kids try stuff like that, I laugh. Like, oh, really? Well, get that together and then we'll talk. I don't know. I can't talk to you now.
That's like the only thing I have to compare that to, because I don't have kids yet, but my dog will try his little beggy eyes. He knows he's manipulative. When he wants something, he puts his ears back and he does like the little like for me. And I'm like, that's not going to work on me. It does work on me usually, but he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, but generally the difference between kids and dogs is that like my kid wants like a, video game or something. I'll be like, no. Yeah. Try again another day.
My dog just wants a piece of breakfast sausage.
Right. So it's a little bit easier to give in for breakfast sausage.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not buying him Xbox. Okay. I did want to thank you. Tara T is here. Hello, Tara T. Also an excellent knitter. She says, I want the hot brawny man, not the woman. Yeah, of course.
I think they forgot who they're marketing to. Yeah. I mean, really. Who's picking out the paper towel in most houses? It's us.
It's us. And that's not going to make me throw down my dollar. It's going to make me laugh at you and think you've got an idiot doing your marketing.
Yep.
John Thomas says, I'm loving the hat, Keri. Well, thank you. I'm glad someone likes it. It is the warmest hat. Let's see. Did I get them all? I did. Here's just the one. So I have something else. And feel free to jump in if there's something you want to talk about. I've got one more thing that I had pulled up if you want to talk about with me.
Yeah.
Well, I've been doing some research on cults and language. There's a high schooler who I am helping to mentor for her senior project, which is very exciting. I want to do a good job. So I've been doing some reading about the kinds of topics that she's covering. And I came across this article from the Financial Times, and it talks a lot about cults, how cults use language to control the way that people think. And then by controlling the way that people think, they can control their behavior more effectively. And so I just wanted to read this part and see if you guys spot the same thing I do. Because to me, now in this article, they go on to talk about, like, they specifically are calling out QAnon as a cult, which I think it does have a lot of cult characteristics. And they're calling out the stuff that is on the right that they see as cultish, which is fine. Mm-hmm. But they just conveniently kind of ignore or skim over the social justice cult, which I think this completely applies to. So I'm going to read part of it. In Cultish, the language of fanaticism, linguist and journalist Amanda Montel makes the persuasive case that it is language, far more than esoteric brainwashing techniques, that helps cults to build a sense of unshakable community. Quote, with emotionally charged buzzwords and euphemisms, renamings, chants, mantras, and even hashtags, pernicious gurus are able to instill ideology, establish an us and a them, to justify questionable behavior, like banning all Trump supporters from Ravelry, justify questionable behavior, inspire fear, gaslight followers into questioning their own reality. Essentially, everything a cult needs to do in order to gain and maintain power. And so then I wanted to read just a little bit more. Montel draws a useful distinction between relatively benign self-help or fitness movements that might use, quote, insider language to create a powerful sense of belonging, and destructive cults. So she's sort of saying, which I think we can all acknowledge, that these tactics are used in some organizations, like in self-help groups or what have you, in a more benign way. Like they're still used to cultivate that sense of community and belonging, and you feel like you're a part of something. And they have special language. Like I know people who are into some of those MMLM, like nutrition things that they sell, like Thrive, or what's the one that's really popular that everyone, I can't think of the one that's really big right now, but it's kind of like Thrive. And people have different shakes, and they have patches and things like that. I did the Thrive for a while. They have like a whole language that they build internally that make you feel like you're a part of this thing in this movement. And they're trying to get you to go out and sell more of the product, whatever it is. So I would classify usually those as a little bit more benign than something like Heaven's Gate cult.
Right.
So,
there's a bit of a difference, right?
yeah. So there's a spectrum, but they're using the same techniques. And so she says Montel's father, now a successful neurologist, was forced to spend 4 years in the early 1970s in Synanon, a drug rehabilitation program run by an unqualified addictions counselor, Chuck Diedrich, that spiraled into an abusive quasi-religion. Group encounters at the center near San Francisco included haircuts, sessions where members were subjected to verbal abuse, ostensibly to help them discard the baggage of the past. This makes me think of social justice warriors and how they try and get people to confess their privilege.
Right. For sure.
To divest of their privilege.
Yeah. No, I think I started to read this book and it was so woke I had to stop. Because I remember hearing about that group that they were part of it.
Yeah, so. I'm curious about this book now, and I bet you're right. I bet it takes a very left slant, and sometimes you see things like this. You can still get something from it. Like I'm getting something from this article, even though they don't specifically call out social justice, because they're probably writing from that left perspective. But I see this is all in social justice. This is what they do. They use buzzwords. They come up with euphemisms. They have stuff about just think of a few off the top of your head: white fragility, white privilege, toxic masculinity, mansplaining. Like they're constantly coming up with these new buzzwords and euphemisms. Yes. They rename things. They also redefine things. They try and redefine words like racism, sexism, women. They do chants and mantras at a lot of the Black Lives Matter rallies. We saw them sitting and doing these weird say their name rallies and where they were repeating everything the speaker was saying. They, of course, use hashtags. One difference is that they don't have like one guru. There's lots of different ones who push this stuff. So, Michael Eric Dyson, who I mentioned earlier, he pushes it. Robin DiAngelo pushes it, Ibram X. Kendi. There's a few of them, but I think a lot of times people, they look at social justice and when they hear someone like me call it a cult, they're like, oh, but it doesn't have that one charismatic leader, so it can't be a cult. That's not true. It fits almost all of the other requirements, all the other characteristics. So anyway, I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, no, but I did start reading that book because I'm really into true crime, right? And so I'm interested in like, why do people start following these different things? And I mean, as a person who listens to anything nowadays, you have to take it a lot of their personal viewpoints with a grain of salt because you know that they're all going to be coming from a left-leaning perspective. But that book was one of the ones where I usually power through. And I just got so tired of it. I got so tired of the whole, like, there was too much woke in it. Like, I know you said you can get something out of anything. And that's true. But also, I don't know. In my spare time, I don't want to hear how terrible of a person I am the whole time I'm trying to like enjoy a book. You know what I mean? There's a difference between, I don't know. But this kind of ties into the one thing I really wanted to ask you about, and seeing as you used to be part of the left, maybe you can give some insight. In the knitting world, right? There are local yarn stores, which if you guys are lucky enough to have one near you, it's usually awesome. They have beautiful yarns that, you can't get at a store like Joann Fabrics or Michaels or, but the problem with them is that they all tend to be liberal. And so when you go to them, not all of them, because I know some of my conservative friends that actually own them, but a lot of them tend to have a liberal slant to them.
Or woke, do you mean specifically woke kind of slant?
Yeah, like I have a local yarn store, which I've gone in wearing my Deplorable Knitter shirt and my braids, so that if they've ever seen me, they know who I am, right? Like I wasn't going in there. I didn't make a fuss, but I didn't go in there like incognito either. I went in as the way I present myself online, and they were super nice to me. So I keep going back, but they have the Black published magazine Radical Threads that all of the leftists, and especially the Black leftists, are really, really pushing. They have, you know, these yarn dyers that are super, like the majority of the yarns that they carry in that store are super liberal, super outspoken. You know, one of them has like an African looking woman on it, and it's like, for her, by her, you know, support her. And I'm like,
with her.
I don't want to, but thanks. But so this is like a normal thing for yarn stores. And so like, I want to go to their knit night, but I also know that as a conservative, they're going to assume that I guess my question is more of anything is, why do liberals assume that they are correct and that they can say things like, a friend was at a knit night at a liberal store, and she said the woman was saying that a Black candidate didn't win the midterms because conservatives hate Black people. Like, and she just said it like nobody is gonna argue with her, and there's not going to be any dissent. And what is this entitlement? Why? Can you explain it?
I love this question. I've thought about this a lot. It's a kind of forced teaming. It's a kind of forced teaming, which is a phrase that's used to describe a manipulation that happens when people sort of cleverly try and coerce you to be on their side in something. And there's different ways that can manifest. And one of the ways, the way I'm talking about and what you're describing, they do force teaming in terms of what opinions are the right opinions in the public square.
Right.
So they go into situations with the assumption not only that they're morally right and intellectually right, but that everyone agrees with them. And so in a way, sometimes I think it works, because if you think about it, if you're a conservative, I know quite a few conservatives now, and if you're a conservative and you're in a place where everyone's talking to you as if you are agreeing with what they're saying, you might be less inclined, because you're looking around like, well, I guess everybody agrees with this. Like, you might be less inclined to step out from the pack, to step out from the herd and make it known that you disagree.
Right.
And because they're talking in that way of like, we all agree here, right? It's forced teaming, as if what they're saying is the norm. One thing I try to do, just because, I don't know, I really love people and they fascinate me. And figuring people out and figuring out human nature, my own human nature and other people's human nature, and like the different ways humans can go wrong, and all of that is very interesting to me. But one of the things I like to do is do the force teaming the opposite way, just to see how they react. So I will often state a real opinion of mine as if it's something they're going to agree with, and just see what happens. And so, but you just say it in the same way that they do, with that kind of like confidence and like, you know, this is the opinion to have, right? Instead of it being, I'm afraid to say that I didn't take, you know, get the jab.
Right.
In a social setting, like I used to work in customer service. One of the gig jobs I had was in my small town, and I dealt with, actually, it was a great job to have, because I got to meet a lot of locals when I first moved to my town, and meet a lot of people. And also, like I said, I like people. I like talking to people. But so if you have a situation like that where you're meeting new people, and you might just say something that's sort of like, you know, critical of the government or of big pharma or the push to take the jab, or I'm just using that as one example. And I say it as if it's a given, and then see what happens. And it's interesting because you get all kinds of responses. Sometimes you get them wanting to argue with you. Other times you find out that they secretly agree.
Right.
If there's not a lot of other people around, then you find out they're not even woke. Like, they're like kind of secretly based. So I just like to flip it on its head, because they do that all the time. One great example. Here's one. I was trying to think of a good anecdote.
Okay.
This is from a few years ago. I used to sell handmade cowboy boots, and we would get people, they were like high end handmade boots with like 1940s and 50s patterns, like really cool stuff. And we would get these travelers from all over the world, who many of whom had a lot of cash to burn. And I got this guy from San Francisco. I was talking to him, and at one point he was a white guy, and he was talking about how he was thinking of moving to Austin because and then he was like, and we were getting on fine, and I'm ringing him up and everything. And he's like, and because Austin, I mean, I've got to get out of San Francisco because San Francisco is a little, it's become a little too white, if you know what I mean. And I was like, oh, so you're racist. Okay. And I was like, kept bagging at my stuff, but I said it not in a mean way, just as if, okay, I got it. Like and he was like, no. And it made him kind of consider, like, I think it made him consider, am I in the wrong for saying something like that? Yeah, dude, you are in the wrong for saying something like that. You're leaving a place because it's too white. And by the way, you are white. Like, what does that even mean? And you're so like, and you're thinking he was doing that to me. He was thinking I would agree with him. He was thinking I was woke, and I'd be like, yeah, too many white people there, right? And it's like, no, I don't agree with that. You can kind of flip it on its head, like, oh, okay, so you racist. Okay, I don't agree with that, but anyway, I like these boots that you picked out. Like,
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if that's a good example, but what you could do, here's what I think is cool. If you did go to one of their knitting nights, and let's say they are all woke, and they're all saying stuff that you don't agree with, at some point you might say something that you suspect they'll disagree with, or you might directly disagree with something they say. But just don't say it in a way that makes them feel like you're judging them, or you're being you're dismissing them as people. Does that make sense? I'm sure you've done this before, where you're dismissing the idea but not them. Like, I can stay pleasant in a situation and be like, well, I don't actually agree with that. You kind of do it with a smile, like this woman was in my house the other day, and she told me I couldn't say master bedroom anymore because it's
real.
Yes. And and I was like, and I know she's a little woke, and I was like, why? I just kind of smiled. I was like, why? She's like, well, you're not supposed to say master bedroom anymore. You're supposed to say owner's bedroom. I said, well, why? And she's like, because it's slavery. And I was like, I just started laughing. I was like, oh, I don't care about that. And then, like, not that I don't care about slavery. I don't care about these new language rules.
Yeah.
Like, and by the way, owner's bedroom. That's silly. Yeah. And so by laughing at it, I think I hopefully made her wonder, like, is this a dumb thing that I'm saying? Is this a funny thing that I'm saying without being mean? But without being mean. And then it's still like, spend the rest of the evening being very kind with this person, even though they just said something crazy.
Right.
Like,
I think when, like, I haven't heard the term forced teaming before, or maybe I haven't, I don't remember it, but I think that that's really interesting, because that's what it's like. It's like you get in this group with these people, and especially, I mean, I live in New York. Everywhere I go, people don't agree with me. Like, it's just life. I'm used to it. But when they do that to you, you don't want to object. You don't want to, it's not like it used to be where you could just like, oh, well, I don't agree with that, but we can still be friends. Like, it's turned into this, like, us against them. And if you don't agree with me, you're horrible. And it's hard to deal with it when you're in that situation, and you're, I want to knit. I want to sit here and I want to knit, and I want to talk to you about whatever. And all of a sudden you're like being called a racist indirectly. It's like kind of comes out of left field, and it knocks you for a loop. It's hard to know what to do in that situation.
I think it depends on the person or the people. Like, in a knitting circle, they may all be strangers. It just depends. Like, this person who said this to me about you can't say master bedroom, she's not a mean or malicious person. She's not. She's just heard that in her circles and thinks it's helpful to share it. And so it's easier to respond to that, like, and disagree with it in love, and not, or with a sense of humor, and it not be a thing, because but with a stranger, maybe it's more like you don't know where they stand. I think you can tell pretty quickly, though, if they get their knives out because you disagree with them. You can usually tell, especially if you're being kind when you disagree. Like, you can disagree in kindness. Like, if you're sitting in this nerding circle if you're sitting in this nerdy knitting circle,
Exactly, that's what we are.
and yeah, and somebody were to say something like, I can't believe these people these anti-maskers who just refuse to wear masks, like, you know, and people are like, yeah, that's crazy, da da da. You could say while knitting, like something like, well, I don't know, like, I've seen conflicting studies about whether they even worked or not, like from some scientists who said they didn't. And you can say it in that kind way that's not like you're assuming, almost like you're asking them, well, what do you really, you know, does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah. But I mentioned it when we were talking about the getting kicked off of Ravelry. Now there's not so few places, because there's still spaces for knitters to go. But I think that because we've lost one of the main places that we were able to like share projects and ideas and stuff. And I think probably Ravelry calling everybody a white supremacist has kind of emboldened the people that agreed with them. But you know, the girl I was talking to, she's like, I like going to knit night. I don't want to be ostracized. So is it better for me to just not say anything? And I get it. It's hard. It's hard when people call you names and stuff.
The other thing that's great is you could, now here's a different anecdote I'll give you. You could not say anything, even though you know their beliefs because they speak them all the time. And you could just choose to treat them with kindness and friendship and grow that friendship. And then later on, if they find out you're a dreaded conservative, it might be harder for them to do that thing where they other you. I mean, I have another anecdote with there's a very woke antique shop that I like to go to. I love this shop. They're so woke. They're over the top, in your face woke. I don't care because they're good people. I know they're good people, even though they speak an evil belief system. I can tell they're good people. We really get on as long as we talk about antiques and all kinds of stuff. One day they're going to find out what I believe about this. I haven't said it to them yet because it hasn't come up in conversation. It's just their beliefs are all over the store. Right. But like in these knitting stores. But if it ever were to come up, and I have a feeling that if I were to say something like, oh, well, I actually don't agree with that, they would be more inclined to listen to what I'm saying because they like me already. like they let a dreaded, deplorable, anti-woke person into their store in their heart. But that's the way people, and into their junk shop and into their heart. But it's because that's the way people change over time, I think, if they're truly open-minded. It's just like when gay people, it used to be a whole big thing about coming out of the closet where, you know, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, what have you, or 80s, where gay people might overhear people they know and love belittling gay people, and then at some point come out to them and say, I am one, like, and it helps to humanize it. It's very similar. It's like I am one of these anti-maskers or whatever it is, you know, deplorables. I am a Trump voter. And surprise, you like me.
I think that's what my friend who has had this all happen to her, I think that's where she stands. Me, on the other hand, I think I'm going to go into knitting one day with my politically incorrect knitter's bag and my deplorable knitter t-shirt on. Maybe I'll bring my mug, be drinking coffee, and see if anybody says anything. Like,
you go that route. You do the forced teaming in reverse. Like, this is normal, right?
Yeah,
or bring them a mug. I got a mug for you.
But it's just interesting, and I knew you'd have a viewpoint on the forced teaming thing, because it's a weird situation when you're like hanging out talking about books and movies, and all of a sudden somebody's like, well, you know, so and so didn't get elected because all the conservatives hate Black people. You're like, what the?
You're like,
I was knitting, and what? I didn't know. I didn't know that about myself. Like,
it's also helpful if you know a fact that directly contradicts that false claim that they're making. And in that situation, I wouldn't know. Maybe they're talking about Stacey Abrams, but in if they're talking about a place like Georgia, it's like, really? Because Black people get elected all the time. Maybe they just didn't like Stacey Abrams. Like,
Right. No, that's
maybe.
another good point. Like,
Yeah.
so I guess if you're going to go to a woke knitting shop for knit night, you should brush up on some of your stuff so that you have some rebuttals.
Yes.
Go research who won the midterms. See how many.
You can also be disarming by wearing a ridiculous hat that makes them laugh, and then be like, Fauci belongs in prison. I'm kidding. Like, who is this crazy bear?
Oh, that's a bear? I thought you were a woodchuck the whole time.
I don't know what it is.
We did Groundhog Day yesterday. I guess they're just on my brain.
Oh, Groundhog Day.
Mhm.
That's an excellent film. Okay, I'm going to read a couple of super chats from people hanging out with us. Look, Mr. Neil James is in the chat with his oogly cats. He says, I have nothing to say, just sharing my English shekels. Thank you for the $4.49 in shekels. I appreciate it, kind sir. You guys go and check out Blocked Magazine if you haven't already. He covers all the knitting war stuff. He points out a lot of the hypocrisies in the social justice ideology within the knitting world. And
a new issue came out today.
Oh, I didn't know that. A new issue out today.
And I had to read it before I could even get out of bed. It was that good. So go read it.
Your audio just did something weird.
Oh no.
Is it just for me? I can still hear you. It just sounds like you're talking in a tin can.
Oh no. Hold on.
It's okay.
I hope it's okay.
I can still hear you. It just sounds kind of like a chipmunk, like a groundhog.
I'm sorry.
That's fine. Thank you, Neil James. Let's see. John Thomas, $5. Thank you, sir. He says, Keri, students with pro-life hats were made to leave a Smithsonian museum. Well, I had not seen that.
Wow.
But let's see. I pulled it up. It looks like this is a news story. Thank you, John Thomas. I didn't know about this. So this is from today, Fox News. Catholic students kicked out of Air and Space Smithsonian Museum for pro-life hats. Quote, we had almost no words. Excuse me. The Catholic school students stopped at the museum following the March for Life. Pro-life student is opening up about his shocking encounter at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum after being kicked out with his fellow group of Catholic school kids for wearing pro-life hats. Student Patrick Murphy told Hannity that the group was viewing an exhibit when they were approached by two women, presumably security guards, about their attire. They said, all people wearing a pro-life hat, take it off. Wow, Murphy recalled, and immediately were confused. A student in the group told the women that the blue hats reading Rosary Pro-Life were used for identification purposes to keep the group together, but the women blew them off. There's one of the students. After walking out of the museum, Murphy said they were approached by a man claiming he had reports that the group refused to take off their hats and that they were in trouble. After a student reminded him the hats were used to identify the group, Murphy defended his constitutional rights. I said, this is a violation of our First Amendment right. This is a government-funded building. How are we paying for this with our taxes? And I'm not allowed to wear this hat, he told Fox News. What a smart kid.
Right?
The pro-lifers were blown away when the man said it was a neutral zone and their rights didn't apply.
Yeah. I don't think that's accurate.
American Center for Law and Justice told Fox News that legal action is imminent. Wow. Wow. Well, there you go. That's a great example of kind of what we were talking about before. It reminds me of Ravelry.
Yep.
I don't know. I almost have no words for that either. I'm glad that these kids are prepared, though, to speak to their rights. I mean, that's an 18-year-old who knows what he's talking about to say, yeah, I'm allowed to express an opinion about something on an item of clothing.
Right. And it makes me wonder, if I went in there with a Black Lives Matter shirt on, would anybody say anything to me? You know?
Oh, probably not at all.
Right, which is why it's so messed up.
They probably would say that they don't consider that to be political.
Oh, okay.
Save Faces says, anyone know what Grandma Day Keri was talking about? No, Groundhog's Day, the movie with yeah, with Bill Murray.
Yeah,
it's so good. It's so funny. Okay,
we didn't watch the movie. We just studied groundhogs yesterday because that's what we do here.
Wow. You smart kids.
Yeah, we try. Some days more than others.
Groundhog Day, the movie, holds up really well. And I will say it's not just a funny movie and it's dark in places. It's also really, I think, it's ultimately about a guy figuring out how to be a better human, like a better version of himself over time. That's why you feel good at the end of it. It's not just that everything works out okay in the end. It's that he really went through this transformation, and it happens in a comedy film. So it's comedy, and I guess, I don't know if you would call it drama, but comedy and something serious at the same time, which I just love it. So yeah.
That is a good one.
So is there anything else that's on your mind today? Those were most of my topics. I've been consumed with our heating and house issues. We've been I forgot to do announcements at the beginning, so I'll say this. We've been working on the house a lot. We have 2 more music concerts coming up, and we've been stripping, staining, sealing the floors upstairs where it was warmer, keeping ourselves busy while it was cold down here. And we have February 11th and 12th, we're doing house concerts. The lineup this time, it's different musicians than the first time. It's going to be, oh man, it's my husband's doing piano and guitar. We also have viola, violin, pedal steel, a couple of violin players. Actually, it's just going to be, I think it's going to be an amazing show. So if you would like tickets, we are sold out for February 11th, but we still have tickets left for February 12th. And you can email me at deprogrammedpod@gmail.com. It is in our house, so we have limited capacity. And I got a heads up from some people that they didn't get they asked to be on the email list and they didn't get the email about tickets. I'm really sorry. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. It might be that because we're using MailChimp for it, it might be caught in spam. But if you did not get the announcement and you asked to be on the list, just email me at deprogrammedpod@gmail.com and I'll try and figure it out. So that's what's coming up here. I think that's it. What about you? What's coming up for you?
I've been I homeschool my kids, and so co-op starts next Friday. And so I have just been getting ready for my classes. I teach knitting and crocheting, so it's the push to get ready for school, honestly, right now. And with starting my Patreon, my life is just, that's what's up. That's why I don't know much about the news this week, because I got to get ready for class. I got to teach all these kids how to warm themselves when the government shuts off their electric. So,
and you are doing a good job if you're teaching them knitting and crochet. I have to say, all the beautiful hand knit items that people have sent me, it's going to good use. I was all wrapped up the past 2 shows, and I was telling Deplorable Knitter before the show, I mean, wool is no joke. Actual wool is very warm. So I get it. Yeah. Well, great. I hope everybody goes and checks out Politically Incorrect Knitters. I'm going to put the link up on the screen. One last super chat. Captain Palsy, $2. Thank you, sir. Says, fun fact, groundhogs live 12 to 14 years. Oh, groundhogs live.
I did that in my head too.
I didn't know that.
So you mean Puxatawny Phil isn't the same guy every year?
Don't tell the kids that.
I know, right? I won't.
Here we go. Pirate Tomsky. Thank you, sir. What a gentleman. He's got Deplorable Knitters info up on the screen. You guys can go to Politically Incorrect Knitters here on YouTube. Visit Deplorable Knitter on Patreon, and also check out her website linked below for knitting patterns, all the dangerous knitting patterns that they don't want you to have.
And if you don't knit, I also do custom orders. So I'll knit it for you if you don't know how. So
amazing.
Just so you know.
Cool. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, guys, have a good weekend.
All right.
Talk to you
bye.
later.
Thank you to today's sponsor, the Church on the Square of Georgetown, Texas, which happens to be my church. My church is no longer allowed to advertise on Facebook, which is unfortunate because that's how I and a lot of other church members originally found them. They've been told that they violate community standards. There's no details there of what that means, but you guys know the score. Anyway, since they're not allowed to advertise, I'm here to give them a plug. You can find them online at thechurchonthesquare.org. You can also find videos of all the sermons and some other kinds of content on their YouTube page at Church on the Square. You can also join us. If you happen to be in the Georgetown, Texas area, we meet every Sunday at Ken's Guitars, that's Kenz, Ken's Guitars, right on the Georgetown Square. We meet outside, right on the square. Sometimes, if the weather's nice, you might find us there. You might find us outside in front of Ken's. But if you're local, I hope to see you.